all creators weather shitty, but as rainy and snowy as it might have been the day that you got married, and while the ceremony was happening, the sun just shone through.
Yeah, I couldn't believe it, man. I couldn't believe it because we saw that location. We got married on that Saturday. We saw that location on Tuesday, and the whole thing was supposed to be rained out. Mm-hmm. There was a lot of things that happened where it's like this wedding is going to be a nightmare. And it all worked out.
I know.
It all worked out. Very seamless, actually, by the end of it, which was nice. But leading up to it was pretty wild.
And your grandma was pretty awesome.
Yeah, her and Shannon got along famously, which isn't overly shocking to me.
Yeah,
they're both characters, that's for sure.
Yeah, your grandma's awesome.
Yeah, she's my fave.
So what's it like being married for a couple months now?
Well, I think we still have the day, and so there's a lot to unpack, and so we've been chatting about that day, because we started going for walks. And so what we were running into is, life can just be busy. You could live with somebody and really not connect with somebody for, all week until you actually spend some time. So to kind of counterbalance that, what we did is we started taking walks. So we go on walks maybe 5 times a week or so.
No way.
And when we do that, we're able to, chat pretty in-depthly for, an hour or so a day.
Yeah. Sometimes we spend more time with the people at work than we do our own family. Eh?
Yeah, which is hilarious. I mean, I got some cool clients, don't get me wrong, but, and some guys that are half decent around the branch, but I'd rather not, you know what I mean? I'd rather have more time with, my wife than guys at the branch. So, not to say the conversation can't be in depth, but I really thrive off of like in-depth, deep conversation as opposed to surface. Mm-hmm. Not to say I can't do surface. I mean, I do surface all the time. I have to, but I'd rather have more in-depth, kind of to the bone, really get to know somebody conversations. And so me and Kelly have that all the time.
Do you have those with other people?
Yeah. Select few though.
Yeah.
Select few. I think there's a fear of if I get that deep now, which is fine. Like I get that. Like I remember just recently I was in Edmonton. I saw one of our manufacturers and I was chatting with one of the guys that worked the front desk. This guy's older and, as soon as I saw him, we started having like this very in-depth conversation. And he had gone through some serious family issues, and he's a man of God as well. And this guy starts, his eyes are watering as he's talking about what he's talking about. He's getting me fucking kind of what, like it was we went right to business, eh? And so what was funny about it is that I found out that his son, a year prior to this, I was at one of our events, association events. And I had chatted with this man's son who's in the same position as I am, just at a competitor. And, I asked him how he's doing, just shooting the shit. And this guy just zeroed in. He was half in the bag, not loaded, but not sober either. And he just went in depth. And this guy had me crying. And so I thought it was funny because in this conversation, I didn't know that they were father and son. And so in this conversation, I realized that it's father and son. And I said, I started laughing because I'm like, well, of course you guys are one and the same because your son had me crying about a year ago and now I'm watering up, right? So I leave this in-depth, emotionally charged conversation and I see a client and me and him were connecting so tightly that it was unbelievable. And I carried that energy to this guy. That was 4 months ago, or maybe I was 2 months ago. I haven't chatted with him since.
Wild.
And I knew it was either going to be one of the two. It's either it was way too intense and I got to push away, or we're going to lean into this and this is the relationship moving forward. And the guy pushed away, which wasn't too shocking to me. But he had like all the way down to this guy having the same hairstyle as me. It was net new business. First time I met this guy. And, he had the same hairstyle as me and used the same products as I did. The guy also drove a Genesis and on and on and on, right?
Why do you think he opened up to you so much right at first and then kind of shut it down?
Well, I think this guy knows too much about me now. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like this guy knows certain things that this guy shouldn't know. Like, it's like a 3-year relationship. The trust is built, and then those things are dropped. Not those things are dropped first meeting, and now all of a sudden that's where we kick it off. You know, could be a fear. Where the fuck does it go from here to? You know, I think there's a lot of things, but what I do know, I don't know for sure. You know, all the different avenues, but I do suspect that it's fear based.
Yeah. But it could easily start off on the right foot by somebody being open and vulnerable.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Oh yeah.
And like if the person's like, if they can feel that true energy of like compassion and love, it may start like that and never divert from that. I do think there's always a period where people like leave that situation where they've kind of been, in their opinion, too open and vulnerable, and then the fear of like overexposure kind of creeps in later, and then they kind of back away, right? But I've seen like a lot of my relationships with people have started out like totally open and vulnerable for some reason. You know, I have an ability to have people open up to me right away. And if they do that right away, then it works out pretty good in the work that I'm in, at least, right? And in friendships. As long as it's not just always based in self, as long as we can kind of go back and forth, we can have an actual vulnerable relationship. But a lot of times in the work that I do, it's not really a full-on relationship. It's more like me being open and vulnerable and being a listener, and then having to kind of navigate them, their own selfishness.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it can start like that. So then he just backed away.
It's definitely the market though, right?
Yeah.
Like in the recovery space, for example, I'd probably say at least half these people know that they're supposed to be somewhat open and vulnerable and that type of stuff. And, you know, you could easily capitalize on that. I could probably have, you know, on the low end, maybe 30% of my conversations working like that. You know, when it's worldly and it's the world of the material and stuff like that. And, you know, I highlight my achievements. That's kind of the conversation. And even when you highlight your achievements, I now talk about my achievements. That's the conversation. You know, that open and honesty and that vulnerability can be more of a liability than it's an asset or benefit. And the only reason that is because these people have never really been open and vulnerable. And then I have other accounts where, you know, it's gone the natural progression where we kick it off surface conversation. Then a year down the road, these guys feel like telling me, you know, things that maybe they shouldn't be telling me, whether it be their own personal life, whether it be their own business and stuff like that. And I always keep it to myself for the most part. That's kind of the gig, right? So, I mean, no different than sponsorship, where you know, I'd hear something in a $5 or whatever, or something more personal to them, and it stays between me and them, right? My business is the same way. Also meddling too, because I actually have right now a good amount of sponsees that are connected to one another, and there's some fairly interesting things happening on both sides. And I don't like meddling. Same with my business. I could fuck around with accounts, guys that are in the same space, give a guy more, you know, of a discount off, and other guy, you know, maybe not service him as well, all that other shit. And I don't like doing that. It's easy to do that. It's easy to put your finger on the scales, but that's a little bit more like alpha and omega type stuff. And I fucking do not dip a toe into that.
Yeah. Lots of force will create counter force.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe not right at that moment, but it's coming down the pipe.
It is
gonna
coming
be
down
painful.
the pipe. No doubt.
So you've been busy helping alcoholics and addicts too?
Yeah. I mean, that's Tuesday through Thursday, Sunday mornings. That's what's dominated by that. And
how many hours each day do you put in?
Two per session.
Yeah.
That's generally. It could be, if it's a wet guy, we're going through the first number of chapters, could be an hour and a half. He's not saying much. But then if it's like, you know, a guy that I've worked with before, a sponsor's point of view, could be three. 3.5. So I'd say generally 2 hours. So you're looking at, what's that? 6, 8 hours easy. And that's just actual sessions. I'd probably say maybe of conversations, guys that call me, maybe 10 guys in a week, 20 minutes a pop. generally.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd say maybe another 2-3 hours in that. So I'd say at least 10 minimum hours a week.
It's pretty good.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's pretty good because that's not my business, right? Like 8-10 hours a day, I'm doing something completely different.
Yeah.
And then I also have passions and loves that I do. I have a household, like, you know, the amount of time I spent on the house in the summer could be, you know, 5 hours, 6 hours a week, whether that be doing the fence or painting the front or, you know, changing light bulbs, little stupid shit like that, vacuuming, whatever. Right. So just that alone takes the amount of time of sponsorship. You start adding it all together. A golf game a week's 4 or 5 hours.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you start, you know, and then let's say 50 hours working, you know, and then maybe working on a Sunday and shit like that. You start adding it all together and, you know, it's a full life.
Yeah. Well, the one thing about your 10 hours a week helps you keep your sanity. Like, what would it look like if you removed that 10 hours a week and you quit helping others and you just started focusing on your own business of being self-satisfied? What do you think that would look like?
If I quit, today is Saturday. So let's say Monday I quit. I probably got about 2 to 3 weeks of being able to hold dishonesty in check because I've put in a lot of work previous to that. So I'd be able to call myself out dishonestly for probably about 3 weeks to a month. And then from there, it's not going to be a flood, but and this is most guys when they relapse. This is fucking what it looks like. Like if I were to relapse, it wouldn't be, if I cut my whole program out, it wouldn't be, you know, a week from now. It'd probably be two months from now, a month from now is where dishonesty really starts creeping in. And I guarantee it would start ramping up. So I'm going to be dishonest. I'm going to be dishonest in business. I'm going to be dishonest with the guys that I sponsor, my own relationship. You give me a solid 6 months and I'll start gambling again. Yeah. 3 to 4 months, I'm going to start gambling again. And that's where it's going to start.
Yeah.
And then I'll be on the sauce again, probably give me another 4 months from there. Within the year, within 25, I'd expect myself to be fully drunk.
Yeah.
Fully drunk on the substance, not just drunk in the mind, on the substance for sure. Yeah. Guaranteed.
So something came up here recently. So this guy that I knew quite a long time ago, I was around when he first walked in a room and got sober, and I met him and whatnot, and you know, I was in touch with him a little bit through the early days, I'm going to say a few months, and then he kind of found a path and, you know, found his sponsor and kind of went down that road. And, you know, it was a little bumpy for him at first, like it is with most people, and then he kind of straightened out the wheels, and he's been doing seemingly well for a couple of years. And then and he ended up in the hospital. And I got a message. It was funny because I was like, oh, I haven't heard from this guy in a while. And I was thinking, oh, fuck, I wonder how he's doing. And then I had a friend with me that works with me. And I had just mentioned, oh, this guy just messaged me. And I was driving, so I didn't look at it. And, you know, I remember where he was and how good he's been doing. And I don't really get messages from him anymore. And then I look at the message and he's not doing so well. And I'm like, that's typical. I get the message when it's burning down.
Mm-hmm.
And so I get in touch with him and we're chatting, going back and forth. And, you know, he's in the psych ward and fucking at the jumping off point. And he's a bit of a younger guy. And so because it's so fresh, I don't want to like tell too much. You know, I don't want to tell too much because it's too fresh and I don't want anyone to know who it is, of course. But I was like, the questions start coming from me. I'm like, how many sets of steps you done in the 2 years you've been sober? 5. And right away, I'm just like, holy fuck, man. Because we can do all these things to like make us feel good, but the thing that makes us feel the best, we're not going to do, which is like what you're talking about. Like spending 10 hours a week at least servicing other people and like helping other men become the best version of themselves they can be. And that's what really helps you, right? It's what heals you. And it's what has healed me. I was in a meeting last night. I went to a different fellowship meeting, and the reading was on the newcomer. And I talked about my sponsor and how what I brought to the program was just nothing but anger and guilt and shame and venom. But that's not what I bring to life anymore. But that's what I brought. And it was really important for him to focus on the newcomer, which was me. And I remember you and I, remember those days where we'd pretty much watch for the buses from the treatment centers to pull up in the parking lot and almost standing there shaking like every guy's hand that got off in like a lineup. It was ridiculous, eh? And we still do that, right? And so I was sharing about that and how, that I said it like this. The 12 steps give you a lot, but the 12th step gives me everything. And it really has given me everything. It's like healed me the most out of everything. So I guess speaking on that note, people are grasping at like relief through all of the other things, but they won't do
The main thing.
the main thing.
The main thing. Oh, I mean, a lot of it's philosophically comforted. I really love that line because that is most of what it is. I was chatting with Sponsy yesterday, and he's talking about a guy that I worked with, and typically I give a guy 2 shots. And I've tried over the years to give him the 3rd shot to see if it works out, but there seems to be something about he relapses under me twice. It's done. There's nothing I could do. My effectiveness is like 1/8 what it was, and there also seems to be something like when I say there's nothing I can do for you after that second, there's something that produces, almost like on a low level, like a Carl Jung Roland Hazard type thing. When Carl Jung says you're fucked, there's nothing I can do for you. On a low level, that seems to be what happens. Anyways, this grand sponsee of mine is a byproduct of that. And he's got a couple years now, but fucking around like you wouldn't believe. And, calls my sponsee about a week ago and, gonna blow his brains out and, very down and low and this, that. And then calls him a couple days later. And this guy, he's like, my sponsee said that he put in 50% of the work and he's feeling better, more philosophically comforted type thing, right? Like he thinks he's feeling better because he's actually not doing the work. And I said, 50%. I said, that's pretty fucking high. What do you think it actually is? He's like, probably 5-10%. Because, like the reality is this guy, what he did is he went to a meeting. Okay, he prayed that morning and he maybe got a couple numbers. No fucking way he secured a guy, but at the least got a couple numbers and he's starting to feel a little bit better. And I'm like, dude, that's not, because like for a sponsorship it's not just the 12, right? Like I think we could get into a spot where it's like, I don't drink 1, I sponsor 12. And it's like, for that to be properly done, really, I'd say 6, but really from a practical standpoint, 7 on. And 7 for the humility piece, right? But then we chat about 10, 11, 12. It's like, dude, I have to be clear in order to be present, in order to, get the power, have the intuitive thought. Like you just said, in one of the things you were talking about, you had the intuitive thought, right? Of this guy. And it's like, well, dude, without 10, there is no intuitive thought.
Yeah.
Like that all has to be operating fully
Yeah.
in order for me to properly sponsor guys.
Yeah.
Because I'm giving them information. I'm in many cases, their kind of solution, or at least to be able to sort out where they're at. Very commonly, a guy will call me down or he's off and whatever. And it's just, I point to sanity. Right. And that's the first thing that it gives me. It's not difficult for me to give you sanity, but it can be difficult for me to give myself sanity, where all of a sudden I walk into the office, I'm going to be fired today. You know what I mean? And then all of a sudden, I go home and, my wife's leaving me, right? Like that, like those are the extreme examples. But a lot of the times we talk in extreme because it's the easiest to see, right? Like when we chat about dishonesty, like, getting together with newcomers, gambling, these are all really easy things to see. But, being dishonest in my career, driven by pride is much more difficult, right? So when you're chatting with a newcomer, or at least a guy in the first couple of years, talking about the guy who's getting with newcomers and just the repercussions of that dishonesty and gambling is very easy to see. But there's other avenues where dishonesty can be displaced. where, you know, it's not going to be a crash and burn right away. It's more going to be a slow burn. And I see more of that, what I just described, you know, being dishonest in the career and that taking a guy out, not tomorrow, but a year from now. I see more of that than I do see the guys that are, and I mean, like, this guy had 5 years, this guy had 10 years or whatever, right? I see more of that taking guys out in the longer legs of sobriety than, you know, the first 5 years, it might be getting together with newcomers. It might be gambling, right? I think it's very easy to see that, but in the longer stretch of recovery, you know, what's taking these guys out? It's not necessarily, you know, dishonesty with the opposite sex, right? It's not necessarily gambling either. It's going to be something else, and I find that career is the big one, the career and finance.
As you talk about, like, it burns them down later in life, you know, few 5 years down the road, and then they're back out again, right? Great example was that exact thing last night at the meeting I was at. Like, there's a guy there that should have like 4 years, and he's just back from a relapse, right? And I don't know the guy that well, but it's just one of those things. Like, you know, I guess the premise in the meeting last night was the newcomer is the most important. I have a bit of an issue with that. Okay, I think, yeah, they are important, but to me, the most important person, really, for me and my perspective, is the guy that's 6 months or a year or 2 years and doesn't have a clue really what the fuck's going on. And that's why a guy ends up in the psych ward at 2 fucking years, right? And yes, there's other circumstances that can make those things happen, but generally speaking, right? If you don't really, like, work a solid fucking program, you're fucked. And it's only a matter of time before the mental health issues fuck you. And if the mental health fuck you too much, then you're picking up a substance. Like, eventually, all the roads lead to bad shit, right? And so that's what I've seen. And so, to me, the most important person in the room, yeah, it's the newcomer, but it's more like the 6 month, 2 year guy that doesn't have a real clue of what's going on. And, you know, God's kind of theoretical, and God's a theory and philosophically inclined, and then the next thing you know, they're fucking not doing too well, and because God's very theoretical, right? And you know what? It's too bad. It's too bad, but what does the guy do?
Yeah, it's like God of the mind, which is where the problem's centered, right? This is why we talk about a gut level concession, or concession to the innermost self, which is found in the body and overrides the mind in that case, right? And that has the ability to actually propel a guy. A proper one has the ability to propel a guy throughout the 12 steps. He doesn't balk. He doesn't question a goddamn thing, right? But it's not a God of the mind. You know, God of the mind can fuck a guy early recovery, but really has the ability to do damage.
Do you think the God of the mind, to me, that's like the theory of God, the belief of God, but God's not working in and through them, right? Do you believe the practical application is the key to taking God of the mind into like God being for real?
Yeah, I think there's both though. Like I believe that the problem centers in the mind and the body. Obviously, that's what literature says. I also believe that the solution and the spirituality and God is of the mind and of the body.
Yeah.
And so when I talk about the God of the mind, it is like a perspective.
Yeah.
The first perspective we get, God is everything or else he's nothing. And then God of the body is the intuition, is that gut level. And I believe that both need to be operating at the same time in order for a guy to be aligned with that power.
Do you believe that the God of the mind, the theory of God, can work as an effective mental defense?
I know it can.
Yeah, 100%.
But like when we talk about the theory of God, though, like what I believe the theory of God is this childish belief that I do nothing and it'll work out well for me.
So what I think it is that, and me wallowing in emotionalism, mistaking it for true religious feeling, or me like having a belief that there is a God, but really doing nothing to build a relationship, i.e. practical application of having God work in and through me and removing what isn't God through 10, 6, seeking power in 11, and through altruistic action of 12, which may not be altruistic even at the point where you start, but eventually it should get there.
Yeah. I think that we're saying very similar things with that. Because it's like the God of the mind or God of reason.
Yeah.
That's what I truly, that's what I believe the theory of God is. The God of reason is like, it'll all work out for me. I do nothing, but it'll all work out for me. And so if I could feel philosophically comforted, go to these meetings, talk to these people, we don't talk anything real. We talk in, generalities, you know, and like I go to a meeting, they read from the book and it's fluff what they've just read. And I really needed to hear that today.
Right.
Like that type of stuff. That is when I see that package, I know that that's not to the source of what the fuck we're really doing here. Mm-hmm. That is the theory of God where I come to these meetings. I do no work. I maybe talk to a couple people. I give somebody a 20 spot and some smokes, and I'm on the right path here, and I'm doing because I'm feeling philosophically comforted.
Yeah, we're on the same page.
I mean, for the real deal, that doesn't work out. For the heavy drinker,
exactly.
Perfect. I'm sure you're right on track.
Fucking right. Yeah, dude, and I kind of lay it out like this. I see the guy at the podium on Wednesday. Fuck, I'm sober by the grace of God. I got 6 months or I got 8 months, and without God, I'm fucked. And then I see him at the podium on Friday. I'm fucked. I drank on Thursday. And I would see that over and over, and I'm like, how can this convicted person believing in God so deeply on Wednesday be drunk on Friday? And it took me a number of years to kind of figure this out. And then in the big book, Step 3 Literature, where it talks about this concept of was the new and triumphant arch which we pass through to freedom. And it talks about it being a concept. But when we sincerely took the position, all these remarkable things followed. Having a new employer, being all powerful. So that only comes through the practical application and action of like pursuing this relationship. And I don't mean like theoretically or philosophically either. I mean through practical action of looking at yourself in a deep and honest way and actually asking God to remove the things that are blocking you from being the best version of yourself that you can be. And along that journey, part of it has to do with like the humiliation of who you are and who you think you are, and being able to be open to that and being able to accept it, and then being willing to like work on it and change it through practical application of like 10, talking to people, getting insight from other people who are doing this, like all of those things produce like God working in and through me. A few years back, you had mentioned if I have a problem of mind and body, I need a solution of mind and body, which is God, right? And I didn't think of it quite like that, but I believed exactly in what you were saying, but I looked at it like this. When I talk about healing, I can heal and let go of the mind, but it's not until I heal and let go of the body where I actually heal what was ailing me. And that only happens through continual, persistent commitment to change and to keep seeking this power and asking for help. But my part in the willingness to let it go, being aware of it and working on letting it go and putting myself in the situations that are going to challenge me instead of avoiding the situations, because whatever I resist will persist. But then pulling on the power and doing my step 10s in these moments that actually teach me, even though at first it might be very scary and like very discomforting, eventually, millimeter by millimeter, you can be in that situation and the body is calm and it's actually let go of the body and you've actually healed that wound for the most part, from what I can tell. And I think that's what sponsorship does more than any other component of recovery, is exactly what I just described. Of course, all the other components are just as important.
Yeah.
Like you can't just sponsor and not do personal inventory.
Yeah.
You talked about before we got on the mics that prayer is the big headline. It always has been. Inventory, when you understand the literature, which you do, the literature always speaks of inventory first, right? Always.
Yeah.
But everyone wants to go to prayer,
Yeah. Well, it's the easiest.
right?
It's the easiest. I mean, if you look at inventory, prayer, meditation, what's the easiest fucking thing I could do right here, right now? And I don't necessarily need experience with it. I don't need to learn how to do it. It's not much of a process. Right here, right now, I could pray. Right? And, you know, for the most part, I may or may not feel a little bit better. Well, the odds are it's going to move the scale by something.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But it's not going to fucking change much at all. I think, you know, God of the body and what we're talking about is definitely the thing that takes the longest for sure. I'm chatting with a guy the other day and sponsee of mine. He's like, well, isn't that dishonest? Because we're talking about defective character. We're talking about changing things. And so we're in, there's a solution. We're chatting about that piece. And Carl Jung, he talks about, you know, the emotional rearrangements. You know, I've been trying to produce some such emotional rearrangements within you, right? And, the biggest one, as far as I'm concerned, is from selfish to selfless, right? From prideful to humble, right? And so how do you accomplish that? Well, your thoughts have to be dominated by other people. And he's like, well, Jess, if I do that, you know, is that not dishonest? And then shortly after he asked me, you know, how often are your thoughts dominated by other people? And I said, quite often. I'd probably say I got a 70% shot of my thoughts being dominated by other people. And I'm not saying what I'm thinking about here, because right now I'm engaged in this. So I'm thinking about what I'm going to say. I'm listening to you, might think about some points I'm going to say, and then listen to you. So I'm engaged in something here. What I'm talking about is when I idle or when I'm on autopilot. Where does my mind go when I hop in the fucking car and I drive home? Right? That's what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. That's my thoughts being dominated. And he said, well, isn't it dishonest? Because it is for me right out of the gate. I said, brother, a lot of this, when we talk about the changes, it's like the pendulum for you is swung so far, selfish, self-centered, that you are dominated by it. It drives you. You ooze it. You breathe it. You live yourself. Where we have to switch that pendulum all the fucking way to the other side, where almost you don't get the luxury of a thought to yourself, right? And then once you start moving that pendulum back, because there is going to be a certain level of self that makes sense, but it's like in early conversations, it doesn't even make sense to talk about that.
Yeah.
And then it's almost as time goes on, that gets more and more genuine to where, like, for where I am today, it's all genuine. Like I was thinking about a situation of giving one of my younger brothers one of the vehicles I have in my caddy. And what that does for me is absolutely fuck all. It doesn't do a goddamn thing for me. I'm going to maybe drive it back to Ontario, give him the keys to this car, in the hopes that at his young age that maybe this is the thing that gets him another job or gives him a little bit more independence and shit like that. And that's where my thoughts went to on autopilot when I was idling before I had chatted with this guy. And so I brought that up. And I said, well, that's where my thoughts go to naturally. But when we chat about the God of the body, that's very difficult. It takes a lot of time to get that way. You know, the get to God of the mind is just a perspective. And it's really like a practical perspective. God is everything or else he's nothing.
Yeah.
And I actively live that way until it fucking changes. But
Yeah.
dude, there's a lot of work to get the body there. A lot of fucking work to get the body there, right?
Fuck yeah. When we're talking about like this category, let's say, and before I kind of go on to this category, remind me of this category. I'm going to qualify it first. Recovery is very judgmental, right? It's very judgmental. There's a lot of people watching and judging because we're supposed to be living spiritual lives, right? And I'm guilty of it. I'm not going to say I haven't never been. I'm becoming less and less like that as the years go on. But it's very judgmental. So when I say categories, the first thing that popped into my mind is, oh, you're separating and you're being judgmental. honestly, bro, the way that I'm going to look at it and have looked at it for many years is it's facts out of my experience. Just like you and I see the facts out of our experience of what works and what doesn't work and how the alcoholic mind works. And if you do this, this will be way better in your like check marks of being successful than what you believe that action's going to do in your life. Like, you know, taking the job up north or getting together too early in a relationship or, you know, whatever it might be. So in the category of like people that are like healing of mind and body and like really getting healthy, let's say, how many people in recovery really get to that place, would you say, out of a percentage of 100? And I'm going to kind of take this back to the fellowship of the Spirit. Here you will surely meet some of us as you trudge the road of happy destiny. And why I hate saying that in a sense is because people think that I'm saying that that's where I am and fucking no one else is there. That's not what I want to say. That's not what I believe. But I do believe there is a fellowship of the Spirit. And I do believe that it is a smaller fellowship. And I do believe that a lot of those people in that fellowship are serving the betterment of the world. And they are self-aware and they are willing to do a higher level of work of removing things that aren't serving their relationship with the Creator and other people. So those things are duly noted that I think are important. But what's your take on that, if I made any sense?
I think honestly, man, on the surface, what you just asked me should be fairly simple to answer. I think the more that I've chatted with guys that have got some time and that I know for a fact are doing the deal, I think the more that question for myself has really been turned on its head. Because what's the real metric? It's not time. Time isn't the real metric.
No.
Right? So a guy could have 10 years and like on paper should be doing the work, but not even close to what the fuck we're talking about. Not even, it works. Don't know how it works, but somehow it works. By the grace of God, I'm sober today. And that's what this guy's saying. 10 years sober. I would say my original metric would have been the man's deportment and having a conversation with the man, being able to have space to speak, being able to give him the space to speak. And I could tell that he's actively not trying to talk about himself. I would have said that. The one man for sure that I knew that was doing that had a whole host of other dishonest fucking issues that came out later. I would still hold that, but even in saying that, it's not the perfect fucking metric. Mm-hmm. You know, the only real way is the two biggest things that I find in a man being God-centered and operating his life is checks and balances on dishonesty and trying to actively work humility. Trying to actively work humility. Not a theory, like I have the opportunity here to talk about some prideful shit and like how good Jesse's doing and blah, 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 and all this other stuff. I'm sidestepping that to actually talk about substance and not myself and not all my pride, highlighting man's achievements. I love that piece, dude, because it really captures the world of the material. A lot of the things we've chatted about here, when we've talked about, getting up there in years and career and these types of things, that's fucking where I'm at now. The checks and balances on now I'm making real money. Now I'm, buying this, I'm buying that, whatever. And the checks and balances of that where I'm at right now is like extremely fucking heightened. I sit down with a guy, friend of mine now, and I've been actively sitting down with this guy, and I really like him for being on the firing lines of life. This guy's on the firing lines of life, and I see that. And, he has some passions that I don't give a fuck about, but what I care about is the passion. And I'll listen to the guy talk about whatever the fuck he's doing forever, because I love that, and I love hearing it. Doesn't matter what it is, dude. I love it if somebody's passionate about something. And, we had chatted a little bit about the program, and, he's definitely not that strong in that area. And so I find, when we look at fellowship, you could find a guy that's maybe strong in the program, but like has nothing to do with, not necessarily the world of the material, but that passions and loves, whether that be golf, whether that be cycling, whether that be classic cars, whatever the fuck, right? Has none of that. Maybe has this, but then he has, that aspect developed and knows nothing about the program. It's very difficult to find the full fucking package. And I mean full package: health, reputation, career, finance, relationships. To have those areas, a good understanding and growth in all those areas is next near fucking impossible, right? So I think on the surface, your question is very basic. I think to answer it truthfully, in my experience, is a little bit difficult, because what is the real fucking metric? It's definitely not time. I would say the closest thing would be, actively, you could tell in a conversation this individual is actively checks and balances on the dishonesty and trying to practice humility. And because I try and practice humility to a pretty high degree, my threshold for catching pride is very fucking dialed the fuck in almost right away.
Okay, then what are some of the commonalities within individuals that may live very balanced and happy, content, and service-filled lives? What are some of the commonalities?
I'd say the one thing that I've done, that I've seen personal success with, and I've seen others fail all the way to relapse, is when I up my station in life, I have to double down on my fucking program. I see what I just described there. I see that completely fucking missed. Then what happens is that this individual has upped his station in life twice, and he's still running the same program that he did years ago.
Yeah.
And that is prime, dude, for a relapse. And really, when I mean up my station, I am talking about the pride and dishonesty, because those are the two fucking big things, man. Those are the two things I actively work on all the time. But then, there goes all the defective character. Like, he's carrying the same pride that he did digging ditches, and now he's in the office, maybe working with clients, working with the public, where he wasn't. That's like, dude, the program you're running, one man digging a ditch, to now, dealing with the public day in, day out. You can't be running the same program. And then, but it was digging ditches. Then he went into the office, was still fairly, more talking with people in the office. But now he's fucking, to the public. And it's like, dude, you are two programs behind as far as I'm concerned.
So some of the commonalities that I've seen is they have checks and balances on dishonesty for sure. Right? Good God, creator-centered pillars and a system to out that dishonesty. And whether that's even a therapist or, good friends or a sponsor, really doesn't matter, as long as you're actually willing to tell on yourself.
Yeah.
And have these conversations.
Yeah. No, I agree.
Another one is typically working with others. So in the program, working with others, people that have many years in. I'm going to use Daniel P. as an example. 19 years in, and he still works with quite a few people, and that's regimented in his daily routines, his weekly and monthly routines. And the benefits are, he does checks and balances on his honesty. He works with others. He does volunteer things, and he does other things outside of program. He hikes, he goes on mountain climbing trips, and he bikes and does other things.
And he's passionate about it.
About all of it.
Passionate. He loves the shit.
So those are the things that I see, right? Someone that does their own personal inventory regularly and then ups their game on the dishonesty, works with others, and then tries to expand their life in other ways, and not only just for themselves, but he tries to help people in these other passions all the time.
Yeah, dude.
Right?
I think he's a really good case study. A really good case study. You can't say that he's perfect. I can't say that I'm perfect, you're perfect, but a very good case study, because to get the program down and to sponsor and to work, the practical application of the program. Once you're a 12-step member, 10, 11, and 12, practicing humility, that's 7. So you got that. To build the other aspects, like, running a business, not to say it has to happen for everybody, but I think for a lot of us having a entrepreneurial spirit, whether that be, working at a 9 to 5, but then doing something on the side that's more, passions and loves. But then I believe that there has to be some passions and loves that there's no monetary, right? Like I love cars, for example, selling classic cars on the side, let's say, right? That fits with the love. There's some monetary value there, but then there has to be something where there's no money to be gained. I personally find maybe that's golf, maybe that's shooting guns, whatever, right? Like there has to be some, so to have all that and then, be a part of groups in that, maybe shooting centers, maybe, classic car associations in that circumstance, and being able to touch society in this whole different other way. Bring what we've learned here to society. I think that that's a very, very important piece of this thing. And I think that it's very easy to miss. It's very easy to stay just central here. I think most do it if they actually get to like a Daniel P situation, which most don't ever do. This is why I think he's such a good case study, because he encompasses everything that I've just said, which is look around, extremely fucking rare, dude. Name me another guy, really. Name me another guy that has the full package. He might have this aspect, he might have that aspect, different levels of degrees in that, but to be fully firing on all cylinders and everything I've just described, extremely fucking rare. And I'm still working on it now.
Mm-hmm. Well, you're doing pretty good.
Not bad.
Yeah, and I'm working on it too.
But I don't mind that. I don't mind if I'm forever working on it.
No, and nor do I. And another thing in his case study is the guy loves himself and he doesn't need to justify himself to nobody.
That's so fucking important.
And that's part of the healing of the body, right? Through all the years of whatever it is, the disease of validation and needing whatever we've needed to make ourselves happy from the outside. And a lot of that is what people think of you. He doesn't give a fuck anymore. And honestly, nor do I.
Yeah, but
and do you?
Dude, I love that.
Right?
I love that.
It's freedom.
I love that, dude. So I go to I like going to Cross Iron Mills, and I'm probably there. I've scaled it back a little bit, but every couple of months I'll pop in. And they got a Hair Rosen outlet store in a couple places I really like going to. And I went to one of these retail shops, and I saw a woman that had a Rolex on, and I think it was a ladies' date just, and which is fairly basic model, but if it's a real one, about maybe 8 to 10 grand, depending. And I bought a watch, which was a little bit more of a big boy watch. And what I've been thinking more lately is I find it's a bigger flex for me to own this watch and not wear it than it is to wear it. And I almost get half hard off of owning this watch and not wearing it as opposed to wearing it. And so it's very interesting because I find there's a little bit more value in having the thing or being able to afford the thing, but you never know. And I get high off of that as opposed to wearing the thing or talking about the thing or about the thing or whatever it may be. Being tight-lipped and I know is something that I've really operated in the last number of years. But now there's more money and there's more opportunity to actually buy the thing and be able to be, secure as I buy the thing and all these other things. So as I've been doing that, I find it's interesting to own the vehicle. You don't know that I own the vehicle.
How do you navigate working with guys that all they want to do is show you everything that they have and that they do?
Well, that's their natural disposition. So I am pretty...
Is that the disease of validation that I was referring to?
What it is I have no fucking character and I hold no substance. So I have to own the thing to compensate for no character and no substance.
So if you don't get that in check early, it progresses into like your identity later.
I am the car. And dude, that's...
So what checks it?
Well, so like even with me personally, there is an item that I've bought that I buy one sort of item. Kind of how I operate is I buy by brand. I do research. I like the brand and I buy per the brand. That's how I do things. That's how I work the world of the material. And so I don't go outside of the brand, which can be very difficult and cause issues because now past a certain point, my identity is wrapped up in the fucking brand. So to rework that is very fucking difficult, which I've done for the new vehicle I just bought. There's a certain type of vehicle that I buy and drive. And in fact, in my career, people know me as the guy who drives that vehicle. So to rework that whole thing is extremely fucking difficult. When it comes to new guys, it is fortunate, in all fairness, that these guys do come here absolutely flat broke, not a fucking pot to piss in. So you're able to work a lot on the fucking character by the time they get to the point of making some money and being able to make these fucking purchases. But it all has to be, there has to be some base there before the purchases. Once they're making the purchases and they're trying to make up for a character that they don't have, down the road, 2 years down the road, you're in a lot of fucking trouble. This guy's in a lot of fucking trouble, and he has no fucking idea.
Do you think he's in trouble of relapsing, or do you think, and maybe he doesn't relapse, do you think he's in trouble in authentically finding the truth about who he is?
I think that he's really teed himself up to get a lot of fucking pain.
Whether that be relapse or not, in life in general.
You'll see the situation go like, I'd say he's got a 50-50 shot, which is pretty fucking good. And I think that he can still, through the pain without a drink, I think we could still fucking, because what's going to happen is that, and it depends, like the big thing's a car in the first year. That's the first thing that we actually work on. So he ends up getting a car 6 months before he needs to get a car. Okay. And he ends up putting all the chips on that car. These guys over leverage everything they can to buy the car that they couldn't afford in the first place.
And why?
Well, it's all pride oriented.
Exactly.
It's all pride oriented. Then what happens is that this car has an engine failure. This car even needs new tires. A tire blows and he can't afford it. And he's actually wiped out financially. And this is all on a smaller scale because he's over leveraged for a $5,000 car. He can't afford a $500 fix. And so he bought the car to get out of the bus, but now he has no money back on the fucking bus, and he's just extended his time by double, right? And so what I try and get into his mind is that, dude, if you do this properly, if you save the money, if you're on the bus for the right amount of time, if you work out all the tickets, if you do all that properly, you will never have to be on the bus again if it's done fucking properly. And I take that mentality to everything in the guy's life.
And as you do that, as you suffer the pain of humility along that journey, you actually free yourself of the body from the pride that's fucking running your life.
You start making a start on it because even when he buys the car, what happens then? He starts complaining about insurance and gas prices, right? Even when he does it properly. And this is what I mean by up in the station. When you, even in this circumstance, even when you get the car, the amount of program you have to run with the car, with them without it, is fucking night and day, dude. And that's what I mean by up in the station. And it's like, okay, well, that's how you act with a beater. Now you think you're going to play the world of the material. You buy a $20,000 car. You think you're fucking big dick. And then buddy pulls up with a $40,000 car, wipes your car away. And so now you're starting to work on like, dude, I got to be right with me. Where, you think that it's me versus you. But actually it's me versus me. Am I doing better today than I did a year ago? And that's actually the fucking game. That's the game of being fucking aligned. And like, I know Daniel, not well, but well enough. And this guy is not prideful at all. And I find that to be the most attractive. Where I do believe that he has the essence of, I know, which is something that I've been working on for years now. And I fucking do. Once you get into that type of humility, I'd rather not talk about these achievements, right? I'd rather not out myself.
Remember when I was going through or growing through the humility vehicle stages of my journey.
That was my favorite, though. That's my favorite.
Like I was just talking to Shannon the other day, and I was reminiscing, and remember the white F Dodge 3500 that I came into recovery
Yeah, that was
with?
the first.
And like that thing, my ego was still tied into that thing, even though it had a huge dent on it, and it was the last of my fleet. It was still tied me to my ego in a big way.
That was like the lamest vehicle in the fleet.
Yes,
But everything else was gone, and so now this was it.
but it was still a 3500
Yeah, dude, it was a nice
Dodge
truck.
long box.
No, it is what it is. It was a nice fucking truck. What happened to it?
Well, the motor seized at Temple Drive.
You
in
couldn't
52nd.
afford to put fucking. You couldn't afford to put oil in it. Is what happened.
But then that thing died, and then more of my pride and ego died. And then I had to go buy that fucking Grand Prix
Yeah.
for $500.
That actually wasn't. Dude, try and buy that car today.
But my pride and ego were so hurt having to buy a car, period, losing my identity of what was left in that truck, and then humbling myself to go get that fucking shitty job that I had to get, laying pipes in the ground when me and Justin went and worked together, getting up for a job that didn't even pay me enough to make my bills, but still getting up and sitting on the edge of my bed and thanking Creator for this day and this chance and this job at 4:30 in the morning. And I fucking hate getting up at 4:30 in the morning. So I guess like my point is through all of these hard things and doing things right, they don't seem right. I learned a lot of those lessons that came way later, right? And so that was my first version. Then I had, at some point, the red two-wheel drive Ford F-250. I hated red trucks. I hated half tons.
6-cylinder.
I hated 6-cylinder.
Yeah.
And I hated two-wheel drive.
That truck was fucking brutal.
But it was a good fucking truck.
Dude, it did the job.
But it was more humility vehicle for me. And like all of my early recovery was, even up until like 3 years ago, bro. Like I lived here and drove a 2001 Ford Escape that had a fucked up transmission. But it ran good for me for 2 years, and I loved that car. And I finally did get a nice car when I was working over at Weatherskin, and I got that Mustang. But then, they couldn't pay me, and I had to sell the car.
You had the work truck, too, if you remember. You remember that 2500? That was... That was money. That was a money truck. And they tried to give you, like, the big dick sales truck. And you said, no, dude, give me a diesel. You got a diesel here, 6.6. You're like, give me the white one. Great. And it was, nothing fancy, but it was a workhorse. It was a respectable-looking automobile.
But even along those journeys with all the vehicles and me not accepting the flashy one at work, and I took the workhorse one. And
what did I take?
You took the flashy one.
Yes, I did, sir. Yes, I did.
But along all that journey, I always had checks and balances with my pillars about, should I buy this? Even with the Mustang, I remember. And everyone green lighted it because I wasn't going to buy it if it was out of all pure ego.
Yeah.
But, down the road, it's worked out well for me. But it didn't seem like it for many, 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 many years. And like people see me today and they don't understand
the process
and the pain and the fucking sacrifices that I've made to get to where I'm at. And they just see like benefits now, right? And judge off the benefits now, which is fine. And earlier when I said I don't really give a fuck what people think, and neither does Daniel, neither do you. Well, I do give a fuck. That was not totally right. I give a fuck what you think. And I give a fuck what Daniel thinks. I give a fuck what my daughters think. And I'm going to look at whatever one of you says, and I'm going to like really look at it and see what it means and try to like honor the fact that you guys came to me and said something. So that's important, right? It's not like I don't give a fuck at all. I do give a fuck, but not to most people.
Yeah,
right?
It's a select few,
right?
Which is family and close friends, which is the way it should be. Because if you're just listening to opinions running to the extremes, I mean, you'll be twisted all over the place. Even if you start taking all these people and what they say to heart, all these random people, I mean, fuck, dude, you'll be so twisted up, it's not even funny. You know, at the start, it really should be a sponsor and some close friends, like at the start, early recovery. Because that's where people seem to be the most vocal, is early recovery and putting guys every which way. And, you know, I tell majority of the guys, like, a lot of the stuff I tell you, so you'll hear the exact opposite, you know, but keep in mind, I mean, fucking what I say is right out of the book, dude. These people don't even know that this program centers around a book, you know? So it's just like, you know, kind of keep that in mind, right? Keep that in mind because, you know, the book comes first, man, and the fucking meetings are, as far as I'm concerned, a long distance away from the fucking book in number of importance here. And how you're going to get sober and be contented.
Yeah, but even for you, it wasn't until through sponsorship and through your own pain of like living what the practical application asks us to do, where you became absolutely convicted that this was right. It was only through sponsorship and through your own pain.
Through pain, yeah.
Right? And so like you may tell the guy like, you know, it's out of the book. I don't even say out of the book most of the time. I say based on my experience and the qualification of like the numbers of men or women or people that have kind of been helped by myself actually raises my stock in the conversation that I have with the person. Because a lot of the guys that I'm working with, like outside of recovery, they don't give a fuck about a book.
That's true.
And they're going to fucking like shun it even more knowing I'm coming out of a book.
Definitely.
Right.
But when you're chatting with them, does it go without saying that they understand that you've sponsored X amount of men, you've been around for X
I don't
amount
even
of time?
say sponsored to a lot of the people I work with in Nations.
Yeah.
I don't say sponsored.
So when I sponsor a guy in the program related, it pretty well goes without saying that I have that background. Like it doesn't need to be said.
Yeah.
Which is a really good position to be in.
Yeah.
But, you know, it takes time to cultivate that. You know, it took a good amount of time to cultivate that. So it doesn't even really need to be said, which is fortunate because I don't have to sell myself.
No.
Much like, you know, in working with others, you know, we do actually a lot have to sell ourselves, you know, especially if I'm going to, you know, a hospital and I'm trying to build this thing, right? I mean, that chapter is a little bit outdated in the way of having to build this fellowship, right? So when you having to build, there is going to be a certain amount of sales involved, right? And it's just, well, how do we go about doing that? Well, we try and take the less offensive route. And so in your case, talking sponsorship and talking, you know, program could, like book could, you know, antagonize these people, right?
Yeah.
So I get where you're coming from, but, you know, with me not doing that, not being in that space, you know, there's a reputation that I get to kind of lean back on a little bit.
All of this stuff that we're talking about today kind of brings us to what we were talking about the other day, just me and you shooting the shit. Are you able to kind of recreate what we were talking about? Because it was primarily you telling me about your experience and have you ever experienced this? And then we kind of went back and forth. You remember?
Yeah, I do remember. I know that from where the conversation started and where it went, there is some differences, right? So the main, where it went is us getting a little bit more emotional and us, in some respects, being able to be a little bit more softer. And this is something that I've noticed where, you know, I have the ability to lean into my emotions today more than I ever had. The base premise of that is like, you know, honesty without compassion is just brutality. And that's something that we've chatted about years and years ago. And so I knew early on that I can't be fucking hard on these guys and relentless with these guys absolutely all the time. It's just not possible. There is probably a 70% chance that I'm going to be hard on this guy, 30% chance that I'm going to need to be compassionate. But to be able to lean into my emotions has really not been, there. I might be able to give you a pat on the back, but I'm not really going to be able to be in the same space as this man. And probably the last year I've been able to be in the same space, and I am able to, fucking lean into some emotions that were never there. But what I was chatting about specifically is that emotional nature in certain situations being a liability, where I work with this man, there's things that are said in this 5. I'm giving him more compassion than I probably should. And in turn, I have the ability not to keep him in check.
Mm-hmm.
And I might have the ability to, give him breaks where I know I fucking shouldn't be. Just given the guy's past, given what he went through, let's say in childhood and adolescence and maybe even as a teenager, me using that compassion to give him breaks in certain areas where it's like, well, he's doing all these things. Can I not give him a break in this area? And like, of course, as I potentially think about giving him breaks, there's not really so much of a dialogue. All those things are understood, I just described. But, I may give him a break in certain areas. And that break that I give him actually could be the result of dishonesty, CPA, et cetera, et cetera. Next thing you know, this guy's drunk in a year. That's more what I had brought up.
So a couple of years ago, me and you had this chat, and we both have seen the evidence that you have harder and faster lines, and I give them a little more slack. And there's been countless times where I've called you and I've gotten your take on a situation, and you've given me your take, and I didn't do your take, and I gave them the slack, and exactly what you just said happened. It didn't work out well for them. But I share it in the Big Book Studies and on other podcasts. I'm like, my friend Jesse is fucking right 99% of the time. Like, you're right a lot. And I know that. And I even know that in the moments where I'm making the decision of what I know that what you would do, and I know that what I would have used to have done is what I maybe should do. But then there's something in me that tells me, no, let them make their own choice, and kind of stand in that space with them regardless. The shitty part about it is like, I could be hard and fast lines in some of these like guidance decisions that I'm helping them with. But in some ways I don't build like my deep, sincere heart relationship with them and or myself. And so I've kind of deferred to more of that than you over the years. And from what I'm hearing is you're kind of naturally deferring to more of that, knowing that it may not be the best thing for them.
Well, I'm still pushing off on it. That's the thing. I think what's changed is I think I've been able to find more sympathy for the situation. Like, even as you're describing this to me, like, I get that now. I get that why you would take a little bit more of a heart-filled approach. I think I'm opening up more that way, but the direction hasn't really changed much. It's more of like pondering it and, maybe in the process of opening up a little bit more, maybe I've been able to let this slide a little bit, but the direction still stays the same. It's just I'm more sympathetic to the man or to the situation. And that's really where we are getting to, is being more sympathetic to these men, which is the problem with that is that in turn does more damage to me and causes me to work more. When these men are faceless, because there's many men that I've worked with that are fucking completely faceless, that it didn't work, it didn't take. Maybe I see him at a fucking rehab somewhere or whatever. Maybe they call me out by name and I have no idea who the fuck they are, right? Being guarded up to a certain point does work out, typically up into the 5 and stuff like that. But, there's no way that I want to be guarded and, past the 5. I want to be able to open up to these guys a little bit more, whether or not like that opens me up. and opens me up to do more work and opens me up to, have more of a loss if it doesn't work out or something happens to these guys. But I think it's worth it. I think it's worth it. We're going to see what happens with it because it's something that's still.
You think it's worth letting down your guard and opening up?
Not so much in the directions. I'm still going to be fucking very hard on that.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen that be successful, and I'm not going to fucking tinker with that. But instead of being like hard in that and then hard over here as well, where it's just all fucking hard and they can't break through, I'll be hard in the directions, but then over here. And this is a little bit more conversation, seeing them at meetings, back and forth conversation, maybe letting them in a little bit more to what's happening in my life, because these guys will ask, I give them shit. And I've always given them nothing when they ask about my life. That's not why I'm here. Where the last year, maybe I've opened up a little bit more to that, right? And so I do want to show a little bit more of a softer side in that area, but I'm still going to be as hard as I fucking possibly can in calling these things out, because I just know that to work, right? And so I don't want to tinker with that, but I do think tinkering over here in just a general conversation in that relationship aspect, I think could be beneficial up to a certain degree. Because we're not friends either, dude. We're going through this process, and you know what I mean? Where that boundary still needs to be kind of met. And I think that in trying to find that boundary of sponsee, it's easier to go all hard, right? But I just find myself naturally moving into an area where I start opening up in this other area. And so I want to see where that goes while still keeping the dynamic of sponsee.
And how did you notice it coming? How did you notice this other piece of your emotions kind of like coming to the surface and like talking to you or asking you to look at it or whatever?
With Kelly, I started noticing, at least I came to a spot where I will either have to get more emotional or I don't have a relationship.
Was that a couple years ago?
This is like going back 8 years ago. We've been together, and I came to the realization, like at least maybe a year and a half, 2 years into this relationship, where it's either I get more fucking emotional or I don't have a relationship. And now we're coming up to the arena of kids, where again, like this is what I'm talking about, though, dude. Is like when you up your station, you have to double down on certain other fucking things, man. And it's I've been nothing but cold my whole fucking life, man. Very cold, very rigid, always and forever. And because of that, people have always been boundaried. There's always been something between me and them. And, it's been 6 years of actively working on it to where I am today in my relationship. And so there's been that's in my own life. So I've always somewhat been aware of the emotions, and the need to be a little bit more emotional. But with the sponsees, it's just fucking to be hard all the time was showing success. And so why do I fuck around with that? And then there was one guy in particular that I sponsored that I recognized that I did take the softer approach. He's still sober today, and there was no real fucking damage out of it. But it's something that's where it really first came on the radar, that this is actually starting to change, and this is starting to bleed into, this has the potential to bleed into my sponsorship. That was maybe about 2.5 years ago, maybe 3 years ago now, right? And so from that moment on, I found myself not necessarily getting softer, but being able to tap into emotions more, to where I gave a sponsee a certain amount of directions in the 9. And because what I do is I try my best to work with the circumstances. I don't, like I said, meddling in my business and with other sponsees and stuff like that. I try not to fucking meddle that much. There's going to be the time where, I'm presented certain circumstances. We got to either take a hard right or a hard left, whatever. But he was presented a certain set of circumstances that I thought if he did these certain things, it would produce something very profound. And so he called me, and he did exactly what I said, and it did just that, produce something very profound, where he was able to see himself in his relationship with his wife, his true self. Not what he thought happened, not what he wished fucking happened, what actually happened. And it reduced him to fucking tears, and I was able to lean into that emotion. Not, because I am emotionally avoidant. Kelly will fucking tell you that. I'm emotionally avoidant. You start getting emotional, I'm out of here, dude. I'm gone. You know what I mean? That's you. Keep that to yourself, whatever. And I was able to lean into that and be there with him, feel that, operate in that, be flexible around it, and stay on the phone and be able to navigate him properly throughout that. Where I think I draw the line is it's heightened emotion out of self. That's where, if it's heightened emotion out of God-related actions, that's quite something. You know, if it's heightened emotion out of self-centered actions, that's very difficult still for me to navigate. Because I fucking want nothing to do with it, dude. You didn't do the work. You're bleeding self all over the fucking place. It's coming to a fucking head. And your emotions are either you're going to be fucking crying or you're going to be, you know, killing somebody or killing yourself. You know, so that's where it's a little bit difficult with the emotions. But at the same time, it's funny because if you look at, you know, Kelly has the ability to, with her emotions, they peak at crying. With my emotions, they peak at fucking losing my mind. You know, and being very aggressive. And calling people out, throwing fucking grenades, closing doors and shit like that, right? Which is more acceptable in society for myself to be a man and aggressive, you know, and like more like career society than it is for Kelly to be female, you know, career in society and to be crying. It is more acceptable for me to be aggressive than for her to be crying.
Remember, I don't know what it was, 2 years ago, we went on that drive out past Cochrane and we had like a good heart-to-heart talk. Remember that?
Yeah, we just drove.
Yeah, we just drove and talked, and there was a little bit of a disconnect in our friendship, and we didn't really know what it was, but we just knew we needed, if we were gonna like sustain our friendship, we needed to kind of get together.
Yeah, dude, it had to be like an active. We have to actively try.
Yeah,
yeah,
and because we're probably the same in that way, like, you know, and it was kind of funny as we were driving and like you were revealing like what was really bothering you. It was like I wasn't making time for you, and fucking that was my number one thing for you, right?
Yeah.
And so I fucking got a kick out of that. But, you know, that aside, and as we kind of continued to drive, one of the things that kind of had come up, and we talked about many things that day. I think it was like a 3 or 4 hour drive, and we just got honest with each other. And one of the things that had been revealed over time with me, and I brought it up to you that day, was some of my guys that I've worked with, or some of the people I've worked with, I've been able to like develop long-term relationships with, and like have like friendships with them. Maybe they're not like real close best friends, but decent relationships with a lot of these people where they still rely on me and call me, right? But I also, over the years, because me and you have been so tight and we know a lot of the same people, I got a lot of calls from like people that you used to work with that would call me and say, I didn't want the hard and fast line comments that Jesse would have gave me if I called him. So I'm calling you to ask you because you work a little differently, right? Do you remember that?
Yeah.
And I don't really know like what was going on back then for me or what was going on back then for you, but I know that like you were right more times than I was even back then, and have been for a long time because of your hard and fast lines and your success that you've gotten from it. But I also talked about I've also gotten great success out of the way that I do it, but I do it differently, right? And so as we kind of like full circle and kind of come around back to where we are today, I still build pretty decent relationships and friends with people and do it the same way, but even in a deeper way. Like I think that I've even developed more compassion. I'm even telling them less to do what I would want them to do than I did 2 years ago. And a lot of times, even myself, I know that the advice that I might give them, like the hard and fast line advice, is probably what they really need. But I defer to the more compassionate, strongly suggested advice. And I've noticed myself saying like that. I strongly suggest, but I have to let them make the decision. And honestly, where I think a lot of the shift came was I read the book Seed of the Soul. and sacred contracts. And I started understanding that everybody's life is already kind of preordained. We just don't have the script, but there is kind of a script, and it's going to go however they want it. It's supposed to go. So some people aren't going to wake up. Some people are not going to wake up in the area of their life that they need to wake up. And that could be in their addiction, but it's ultimately the pain behind the addiction. And they may never learn the lessons and see it. So I've really adopted that philosophy. And it's helped me like not take on anyone's shit. So even if I give you the guidance and it doesn't work out for you, which is rare, it's still not my shit, right? And then the other thing that I've noticed that I never talk about on live podcasts or anywhere is I fucking have an intuitive thing that I really believe like what I fucking think you should do is really best for like your whole path. Like, for example, somebody who I know who got some career opportunities and they were really stoked about all these opportunities. Like in my heart and my mind's eye, I could see like, no, you're not done with what you're doing. And I really think you should stay where you are because I know that something more is coming there where that'll really build your career. So these temptations of what you think are going to build your career, they're not really what you're looking for. It's like, stay here, trust me, trust my words, but do what you want. I'm going to support you no matter what. Anyway, she ended up staying there. And now it's a fucking science experiment. Let's see how it goes.
Let's see what happens.
and why I say that like I'm almost never wrong in my predictions is because as I've done the science experiment so many times, it's worked out like every time. And so when I kind of like explain this to somebody and then they're like, I'm like, fuck, man, I'm just going off of my own experience and it's fucking actually worked. You don't have to fucking listen to me and fucking don't. And I don't care, like, honestly. But it's a nice validating feeling to like give someone that advice. And then there's a kind of like anxiety piece of it where you're like, fuck, you just gave them life advice that's fucking can change the trajectory of their whole life. I really hope it works. And sometimes it's like a big one, like don't take that job or leave that partner or whatever the fuck.
Yeah.
That affects like everything. And if it goes south, it's fucking going south and they may blow their fucking brains out at the end of it. But it's never worked out like that.
Well, how much time though? Like, is time a factor in that?
Time in what way?
Well, like, for example, it's the partner and we see that there could be partner issues. You know, is there a time factor to see if there are legitimate partner issues?
It's the ability to see pride in the relationship, like power versus force. Are you operating in force, manipulation, mind and emotional blackmail? Are you guys working out of your wounds and have you? What's the patterns? Or are you guys really trying to work on like a different plane of love and like compassion and forgiveness and like seeing the truth of yourself and each other? That's easy to see for you. It's easy to see for me. And then you see enough. Like, I'll always try to work with what they got. But at a certain point, it's like you're fucking beating yourself with a fucking baseball bat on your own head. You're doing it to yourself.
So have you ever had a guy, like let's say it is the spouse, you call it, he leaves, he blames you?
No.
So,
but that's the worry.
Yeah.
But if they really honestly take my lead, bro, they almost 100% of the time, it always works out.
Yeah. Like I use the time factor. And even with the time factor, they've still started to, with the pain, they've still started to blame me. And then they work it out, properly. But I've seen that 100 fucking times, dude. Where it is all time. So, you know, quite typically, he's 12 stepped under me. There's issues in the relationship. We give it a fucking year. And in that year, he does absolutely everything fucking possible. And the only reason why we do that is that so when it's done and he wants to blame me or blame God or other people, whatever, if he's sanely working this program, he'll be able to see it for what it is. Then no, dude, I actually tried every single fucking thing possible. And then we know for sure without a shadow of a doubt that it wouldn't have worked, and then he actually is able to properly close the door
And make his own
move on.
choice.
Yeah, dude.
Yeah.
But I do work with time. Like, I work with time all the time. I love maybe coming up with something and it's not today. And maybe it's tomorrow. Maybe it's a year from now. And, I get to that year and I'm like, you know what? Fuck it. I don't want to do that. Like, for me to buy a lawnmower took 9 months. And I love that. I love that. I don't have to
So
fucking...
you just lived in the fucking forest of grass for 9 months?
Dude, there's no fucking gun to my head to do really anything. I mean, there's some things that are time, obviously, and something, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But for the things that aren't, and for it's just my own idea of what I want and, grab something new and blah, blah, blah. Like, our own lawnmower wasn't done, but I didn't want to have a situation where it is done and now I got to rush to buy one. So it was on its last leg, so I took my fucking time. It still worked. And bought a new lawnmower. But that's such a small level, But that's what I do for everything. It took me 3 years to buy a car.
Before we got on the mics today, I told you I put a bid on a truck in Edmonton on an online market. And that's what I did. I rushed it. And I fucking hated that I did it, but I couldn't undo it. But the lesson that I've learned since I did that, which was a week ago, is chill the fuck out. Everything doesn't have to happen in the timeline of your mind. And
that's the big one. That's the big one, is your own fucking timeline. That's actually everything.
And I know that.
Yeah.
Which is the worst part about the decision that I made. And then right after I bid it, I saw in small letters, engine issues. And then I realized in 2013, I bought a 2009 6-liter F350, which is what I just bought. I bought it for $20K. I spent $14,000 trying to fix that motor because it crashed on me 3 months into me owning it. I spent 14 grand trying to fix it, and I sold it for 11. So I already knew, bro, that the 09 6 liters were pieces of shit. And here I just bid on it and missed the small print, said engine issues. And after I realized that, I'm like, you fucking idiot. You already did that fucking 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And you just did it again. And you didn't read the fine print, which is how many times you made mistakes in your life not reading the fine print. Dude, it's one of my biggest defects. So it's just like, and now today, while we've been here, I noticed that someone overbid me. And I was just like, oh, fuck, thank you.
Thank fuck. Yeah, I mean, it's a tricky thing. It's too easy to be emotional with these decisions. It's just way too easy. Especially with vehicles. Vehicles are a big thing. They're a large purchase. So, and even, we're chatting about, you bought a car for $500. My first car in recovery, I think, was $1,650. And it's like that same car that I bought for $1,650 is now $4,000, $5,000.
Serious?
Oh, yeah, dude. The market is unbelievable.
That car?
Oh, same car. Same car. Actually, same car with 50,000 clicks more and a year older. $5,000.
Wow.
And so as these guys are getting sober now and getting back into the market, like, I quit smoking, did a vape. At the time, was able to save up a little bit of scratch, and fucking, I saved up enough to buy the car and to put maybe a couple $100 worth of work into it, and then that was it. I didn't put another dime into it. But these guys, essentially what they got to do is they got to save up $5,000 for the same car, and then have, another $5,000 float.
Well, insurance these days, like, I remember growing up, I was paying $100 a month or $60 a month for some of my insurance, bro.
Yeah, I was paying $145 on the Caddy, and Kelly's driving it now, and they just jumped it up $570.
Exactly.
$570 a month. And why they did that is because of every time I've had them jump up the insurance, there's always the excuse. Last time I got a big jump up, they're like, oh, with the fires in Fort Mac and blah, 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 and this is that. That's going back years ago, and now all of a sudden with the hailstorm and with this, and it's like, yeah, dude, it's always an excuse. Mm-hmm. I mean, what a fucking business model, dude. Mm-hmm. What a phenomenal business model. I pay you for a service. I use that service. I got to pay you more. It's wild, dude. Like, name me another industry. Yeah, 500. It went up 400% with the Cadillac. It's $570 a fucking month. I pay more for that car than I pay for a fucking 4-year-old car.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm paying. I think I'm up to 4. I'm insuring 2 vehicles right now, but I'm up to like 400 for something.
For 2 of them. Dude, for two vehicles, we had one that was the Caddy's getting a little bit older now, so we had that and the Genesis. We were paying between both those cars $260 for one of them, $145 for the other one.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's still I think it's $260 for the Genesis, same thing, and then fucking the Caddy's $570.
Mm-hmm.
It's crazy. Crazy. That's all my tickets though.
Mm-hmm.
That's an old Spectre, because what happened was that they changed because they lost so much money paying out for this
Mm-hmm.
insurance and we got like 60 grand worth of work done on our house. So because they had to pay out these high claims, what they ended up doing is they changed their tickets to make up a little bit of the money. So these 5 tickets that I have, 2 speeding and then 3 of them that are fucking 2 turn signals and whatever. This is going back years ago when I was speeding all over the place and I had fucking Buddy, Buddy, because you used him, eh? But I had him, dude, and he was fighting tickets like you wouldn't fucking believe.
He's
and so
great, that
the
guy.
reality is that it should have been 5 speeding tickets, but because of this guy, he was able to get 3 of them dropped for nothing. 2 no turn signal, 1 no seatbelt. But they changed the formula, so they're banging me for all 5 tickets now, hard. But I got 4 of those tickets are dropping off next year, and I haven't gotten pulled over in 2 years, over 2 years now. So
Nice.
yeah, it is good.
Fucking growing up a bit,
Fucking right, dude. But how I did that was, had to swing the pendulum to the completely other side. Like to where I speed, everywhere I drive, I'm going 10 to 20 clicks over the speed limit. That's what was happening. And because I'm on the road so often and I live so far north, anywhere I go is 30 fucking minutes. I'm putting on 4,000 or 5,000 kilometers a month on a car. And so I'm just on the road. Like Kelly drives the same way that I drove. It's just that she's on the road 1,500 clicks a month, and I'm triple that.
Yeah, that's the exact same thing for me.
Naturally, I'm going to get pulled over a little bit more than the next guy, and it was fucking substantial. To the point they're like, listen, bud, you either get this fucking together or we're taking your goddamn license.
Mm-hmm.
And I even upped from a GDL to a Class 5 so I'd have more demerit points to get fucked. A little bit more of a buffer on the demerit points. And then it's just, because it was never no never. It was never no never. I'm not ready to give this up. Like, I'll never give this up. But it was, I'm just not ready to give this up.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually it came, and it doesn't matter, dude. I couldn't have saved myself, any money. It wasn't going to work out that way. It had to be, I'm ready to fucking do this. And then by the time I came ready to do this, I still wasn't apt to congratulate myself because I just don't want to pay tickets, dude. It's not, I genuinely wanted to drive safe for everybody around me. And it had nothing to do with that. And it's much easier and it's more comfortable for me to go 20 over the speed limit. Just the way it is. So it was more out of fucking pain. And now it's just the way I drive now.
Yeah.
I feel uncomfortable going over a certain speed limit, which is hilarious. Very funny.
Okay. Well, let's pull the pin on this session, bro. And
Okay, my man.
let's keep doing them. I know we haven't figured out a flow to like when and how, but it'll figure itself out. But just keep coming. Keep coming back. We'll figure it out.
Always.
I'm so fucking busy, and you are too. You missed the last session, you fuck.
Yeah.
I'm like, he answers after like 4 calls. I'm assuming since you're calling 4 times in a row, I was supposed to be at your house for an online session, eh? And I'm like, yeah, bro. He's like, okay, I'm just at a meeting with Kelly. I'm going to rearrange my whole day schedule. And I'm like, don't worry about it. Me and Tam will just hang for a bit. And it actually worked itself out.
I was like, oops.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, fuck yeah. Thanks, Tom.
Oh, another one bites the dust. Eh?
That was good.
How long was that?
I'm going to say it was about an hour and a half. Hour and a half?